connected, then you will SSH into the KVM server. This dash capital X is a magical little switch that says, hey, forward any X11 connections back across this SSH tunnel and display them on my local X server. So you don't really have to worry about what exactly that means right now. But this is a command you'll do to connect. The IP address right now is 240.102. If that changes, I'll let you know. The password will be in the file that tells you what to do. So there's a password. Once you get on the server, there's this little shell script that starts the virt manager, sets some variables, gets some X related stuff that needs to be done, and then launches virt manager. So now in theory it should come back across the X connection. I have created a demo VM to demonstrate the installation process. You should have your own VM that matches your username. So make sure you use that. Yours should be ready to go as soon as you power it on. As soon as you power it on, it should boot the CD. Mine did not, which was the reason I had to restart the podcast because it wasn't behaving in a nice manner. And now it's still not behaving in a nice manner. So we'll just force it off. And then we'll turn it back on and hope for the best. Because I really don't want to have to stop this and start it over again. So in theory, when yours boots, hey, there you go. It should get to the install or upgrade an existing system. We will install or upgrade an existing system. All right, it should go through the process of booting up into the installation, which we'll wait for that. We are installing the minimal image. There's a disk that already exists on the server, and your VM is pointed to that disk, and it will boot reading that as if it were a CD. So this is a similar process to what you would be following had you opened the CD drive, stuck a installed CD in there, and booted that CD. So this is what it looks like. This is the minimal install image. So we'll wait for this to boot, and then we'll go through the process of installing, and then we will talk about some other stuff. Hopefully it shouldn't take too long. So all right, you want to skip this because that's just going to take a while, and I've already used the media, so it should be fine. To move around in here, you can use arrow keys and tab keys and enter keys and stuff. So hopefully this will get to the next step. Some point. Oh, hey, there we go. Just took a minute to find the installation media, apparently, so now it's going to go to the next step. Alright, so we'll go full screen so I can see the full screen. Click next. Pick your language. I'm going to go with English. I recommend you do the same. English keyboard, unless you have like a British keyboard with like pound signs and stuff. Basic storage devices, we don't have anything fancy. This is basically saying, hey, we're going to overwrite all your data, unless you say keep data. We want to discard data. These files don't have anything on it. For your host name, set it to your name. No, set it to server dot whatever your username is dot lab. That's not a real domain yet, but we'll be creating domain name servers. So set it to something like that. Configure network down here. We'll want to edit each 0. I will specify in a file somewhere what IP address you should use, but right now just connect automatically. Change this to static or manual, I guess it is. Add, we want to put 192.168.240. I'm going to put 111 because I haven't used that yet. I will tell you what to use in the file. Netmask is 24. Gateway is going to be 192.168.240.1. DNS server for now. Put 8.8.8.8. That's the Google DNS server that lets anybody use it. So yeah, so we'll do that. And we'll hit apply. Close. Next. We're in America. Root password. I'll tell you what, you should set this in the file. I want it all set to the same thing so that we can get in if you forget your password, because I don't want you to have to reinstall. About the only real choice we have to make at this point is to specify what we want to do with our disk, our file systems. I was going to make you guys create a custom layout with different partitions and stuff, but I did a little research, and most of the stuff I saw said with logical volume managers and large disks, it's not really much of a big deal anymore to create separate partitions. So some people still think it's a good idea to create separate partitions, but we're not going to do that. We'll look at what we're going to get. So I click Review and Modify Partitioning Layout down here. And what we've got is we've created a volume group, right, for Logical Volume Manager. We created this volume group with a root partition that's everything and a swap partition. Swap is where our system writes stuff from the RAM to the disk if we run out of memory. If we look, our one physical drive has been partitioned into two partitions. We have a 500 meg boot partition, and then we have the rest of the drive is set up for the volume group, and then the volume group is up here. One thing you might want to do, if you do want to change your change the settings, say you want to create a separate home or a separate var partition. Actually, I'll go through that for a second. If you want to create a separate home or var, you can like change this to be like, you know, how much is that? 68. Make it like 4,000. Right, and then you can create a new logical volume. We'll call it /home. We'll mount it on /home. We'll call it, to match the syntax the installer is using, we'll call it LV home. If you want to encrypt it, you could click encrypt. If you do that, it's going to ask you for a passphrase to encrypt it, and then when the server boots, it's going to expect you to type in that passphrase. So what that means is if your server shuts down for some reason and you don't have physical access to the console, it's not going to boot. So that's something to keep in mind. That's something to keep in mind when you're setting these things up. Do you have a way to remotely connect to your console? If you're using virtual machines like we are right now, then yeah, you could remotely connect to the console and type in that password. If you're installing it on a physical machine and you don't have some sort of remote KVM system, then yeah, you won't really be able to do that. So that's how you can modify what gets set up if you want to create separate partitions. I don't really want to do that, so I'm going back. I'm going to go next again. You can just take the defaults for these settings. So that got rid of what I added, takes the defaults. Click next. Yeah, format that. Write changes to disk. All right, bootloader. So it boots. Use a bootloader password if you want to keep people from messing with your boot parameters. You can do that. If you have good physical security, not really necessary. All right, it's installing. Since we have the minimal install disk, it is installing, and we don't have to answer any questions. If you were installing like a normal, I don't know if I should say normal. If you got like the full install media, it will normally ask you which packages you want to install. Give you some options like you want to install a desktop or a server or a web server or a GUI server or whatever else. We're installing the minimal. It's only going to include the core operating system and utilities. It's going to include no X Windows system. It's going to include pretty much nothing except the minimal stuff. I kind of think that's a better idea because when you install the system with the menu settings where you pick all the stuff you want, you end up getting a lot of stuff you may or may not actually need. So, in my opinion, if you install the minimal installation and then add the stuff you actually need, you'll end up with a cleaner system without as much stuff on there. So this is going to go for a while, like maybe a couple minutes. It's going pretty quickly, so we'll wait for it to finish, and then we'll look at a couple other things once it finishes. Guess 102.5 would be halfway, so we're almost halfway. Go, 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 go. Why you stop? Go. Hey, we're halfway. $35 more packages. So it says it's done, but I guess we'll, oh, there we go. Installing bootloader. Hey, it's installed. So now we'll click reboot. It's rebooting. If we would have encrypted the disk, then it would have said in there, oh, enter the passphrase. So the system's up now. We gave it an IP address. So let's see if we can connect. So remember, I am connected to OpenVPN still. So I'll go ahead and exit out of here. That might kill my, I need to kill the, I didn't run this in the background, so it's killing my terminal. I mean, it's holding my terminal. So let me kill that. Fine, I'm tired of waiting for you. So now SSH-L root and the IP address of the server I just set up. I set it as 111. Yes. And then root's password. So there you go. So that is what we need to do to install our Linux system. So once you're installed, first thing I want you to do is check for updates. And if there are some, install them. Yum check update will check for updates. First, it's going to download some package related information. If this doesn't work, then it probably means you may have not put complete or correct information in your network, although you probably wouldn't have been able to SSH into it if you would have screwed up the network. So that says, oh yeah, there's some updates. So we want to install updates. Yum-y update will install all the available updates. The -y basically says, hey, don't ask me, just do it. Because if you don't do the -y, it's like, hey, let's update. And it's like, hey, do you want to do this? Well, yeah, I want to do that. So you can hit yes there, and that will do it. Or if you do yum-y, that will install the updates without asking. It's like, oh, cool, we'll install the updates. So go ahead and let it install the updates. It's installing a new kernel, so you're going to want to reboot it when it's done. This, I don't know how long this will take. Oh, so I'll get my shell back. Now I still have my shell back. So that's going to take a minute. So I'll SSH in again to talk about a couple other things I want to talk about. Let's see. So a couple things to keep in mind about your new server. One, iptables is installed, right, and running. This is the default firewall. So what this means is the only thing that is allowed, well, there's some stuff allowed, but the only TCP thing that we allow in is SSH. So right now you'll be able to SSH into the server, but you won't be able to do anything else. So if you start a web server, you're going to have to modify the firewall rules to allow that. So we will get to that in a few modules, but for now, if you're trying to do anything extra and it's not working and it's network related, then it could be based on the firewall. If you want to turn it off, you can turn it off. All right, I just turned it off. So now it says there's no firewall rules. If you want to turn it back on, you can turn it back on. And now there are firewall rules. We'll get to this later on when we talk about security, but that's just something to be aware of. Another thing to be aware of, by default, that's not what I wanted. By default, SE Linux is on. SE Linux is this SE Linux enables greater access control than the standard Linux permissions, right? The standard Linux permissions are user group other permissions to allow access to files and directories. Well, SE Linux can enhance what kind of permissions are allowed. We'll talk about that later, maybe. But right now, it's turned on and enforcing. So if you get any weird permission denied errors, but you actually have permission to do whatever you want, it could be SE Linux causing the problem. So if you want to fix that, you change this right here, change enforcing to permissive or disabled, and then reboot the server, and that will turn SE Linux off for the short term until we get around to figuring out how it actually works. All right, my updates are installed, so I'm going to reboot. And then in theory, once the reboot finishes, I'll reconnect. All right, so the reboot, I can ping it, so apparently it's at least part of the way back up, and I can get in. So, all right, so that's the steps we're gonna follow to install our operating system on our Linux VM.